right, everybody. So finally back with this episode, recapping episode 5 of Nine Perfect Strangers, Sweet Surrender. As most of you probably know, Hurricane Ida came through and has delayed everything. And I also had a birthday, a wedding anniversary, lots of busyness this week. But I really did think all these episodes would be out probably by Wednesday. I think I was mostly done with this. And of course, life got in the way as usual. But to get back into it, episode 5 of Nine Perfect Strangers, Sweet Surrender. What do you think, Sona? This title, I think this title is thematic to the episode. What do you think?
I think everybody is high and having the time of their lives.
I think that is a sweet surrender, right? Is that, we were talking about last week how everybody's just like, I can't believe they're on board with this. And it's like, yep, they're on board with it. It's like they just surrender to this tactic, to Masha's tactic here with drugging them.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to watch. The characters seem to be growing really fond of each other. They're having a nice time talking with each other. They're developing their relationships. Some of them are there during this really hard time. Zoe and her family celebrating her birthday and thinking of the son and brother that they lost. I like this episode a lot. I thought it was really nice to watch. I thought there was a lot of character development, especially I thought with Zoe, who previously we hadn't really learned that much about. And I don't recall seeing this actress in anything else previously, although I may have, and I just don't remember. But I mentioned to you earlier, I was really moved by her scene in the beginning where she sees her brother and is talking with him and hugging him and talking about how much she misses him and they're talking about how she won't really admit that out loud. It really brought tears to my eyes, to be honest. And I was surprised by that because, I'm not familiar with this actress, but I thought she did a really great job.
I knew her from, I mentioned it before, that she was Adam Sandler's daughter in the Meyerowitz Chronicles, which I highly recommend. It's Adam Sandler and got an all-star cast. So it's available on Netflix. It's a Netflix movie. And anyway, she plays the daughter and she's excellent in that as well. So I do recommend you track that down. Ben Stiller is the other actor. He's the brother. He's the other brother. And they have Dustin Hoffman as a dad. It's an all-star cast. Like I said, Emma Thompson is the stepmom. There's it's very good, very funny, very entertaining, full of some really tough scenes as well. Adam Sandler's dealing with his still recovering from raising his daughter by himself because his wife passed away unexpectedly. So so there's a lot to deal with there. But like I said, still very funny and great chemistry in that cast as well. And she's terrific. She's great in that. So that's the only thing I've seen her in before this one. I'll get to that scene you were just mentioning because it's pretty early in the episode. First, we start off with two things. We see like kind of almost a flashback. We see that there's a client at the spa that has like collapsed. They're trying to give him oxygen. Yao and Delilah and Masha, trying to like resuscitate him. So this might have something to do with the stalker. And then that flashback that she has culminates with her inside the garage. And then we see the shooter again, taking the shot. But for a moment, we see the shooter's face, right? So she did actually see the person who shot her, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure how that's all going to pay off in the long run, but that is something new information. And then, like we mentioned,
I'm still not sure how much I care, I guess, but yeah.
And I'm most of the way through the book, by the way. I'm most of the way through the book, and I'll give you my I actually think we should do like a whole episode at some point where I kind of talk about the book in detail, and probably after the show wraps up. But a couple of things I would say is that, once again, I don't know how this is all going to go because none of this happened in the book. And my very general assessment of the book would be that everybody's backstory is pretty much the same in the book, but nothing that happens in the book happens in the show and vice versa. So other than their like biographies and the framework, there's nothing in common between the two. And the second thing I would say is, as a straight adaptation of the book, I think it's pretty bad because, and this might be where some of the negativity comes from in the reviews and some of the audience reaction, maybe people who've read the book, because it's probably not a great adaptation of the book. And the things, and I would recommend you read the book, by the way. I think the things you like in the show, which is like these people dealing with these with their own internal demons, is the entirety of the book, basically. It's very interior. Almost all of it is happening inside people's minds, including like Yao, Masha. Like, we don't have this kind of like, what is Masha up to? There's no mystery. We're in her head, so we know that she's legit sincere about what she's trying to do, but she's also a control freak. And anyway, so my point is, all the things I think you like in the show, you probably like even more in the book. So I would recommend that you give it a shot at some point in the future. But
Good to know.
I did read one, probably the most generous explanation for this show, as it is, was that David E. Kelley was mixing the original novel and an Agatha Christie novel together. And I'm like, that is probably the most generous read
Okay.
of what we're getting here.
Hmm.
So then we get to the scene where Zoe, she wakes up, she sees her brother like kind of confronts her. Why do you keep saying we weren't close? And they were close. And there's that great scene, like you mentioned, she's talking about how she is so lonely and she never knew what it was like to be lonely, right? With a twin, right? It's the whole twin idea. So it's a very good scene. But this is a strange scene too, because this doesn't seem to be just a psychedelic type episode. There seems like she's touching him and stuff, like he hugs her. So maybe there's something more going on here. And Masha seems to think there is, and I guess we'll get to that at the end.
Yes.
And there's one more thing that I have a quick question for you is he says to her when she sees him that she is his legacy, and he kind of leaves it dangling there. So there's something else, another secret that we don't know yet. So what do you think that and is? Do you think he might have a child maybe?
Okay, I say this as an only child, so maybe I don't know. But I think it's a strange thing to refer to a sibling as a legacy, right?
I agree that I think that is a strange thing. I think that he is saying that almost like as a joke to her. You know what I mean? I don't think he's saying that. I don't think that's like a normal conversation where you say like,
okay,
your siblings are your legacy. Like
right,
maybe your children.
And would naturally lead you to believe that, you're like, when you say you're talking about your legacy, you either, I think you either mean your child or some body of work.
Right.
And given that they're just turning 21, I mean, it's possible that he has some body of work out there, but it seems unlikely.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that maybe there's a diary or something that he's created. But yeah, we after watching Mayor of Easttown and Happy Valley as well, it's like, is there a child out there somewhere? It seems to be the theme of all these shows. So then we have another interesting scene. So I guess it's early morning. We have Masha in Yao and Delilah's bedroom. And they are very heavy sleepers because they don't wake up, even though she's like massaging them and touching them. And she's like, forgive me. I'm, still a work in progress. So she's having her own issues, of course. And of course, we also find out, maybe we'll just talk about it now, even though it comes later in the episode, something that I suspected, by the way, earlier. So maybe this is to the skill of the way they've revealed this, that I did kind of suspect that there might've been something between her and Delilah. So then it makes you wonder, since there is a romantic relationship between Delilah and her as well, like what is the real jealousy that Delilah is having?
Yes.
Like, is she so that is a maybe overcomplicated, and once again not in the book. Honestly, it's maybe just creating more suspects for who this stalker is, who I don't even care, but it is there.
And I feel like, I can't remember why, but I felt like I concluded at the end of this that it is not Delilah. I agree with you, and maybe it's my stage of life of middle age and whatever, but like I feel like this whole throuple situation is supposed to be more scintillating to me than it is. Like, I really just don't care. So
I honestly don't even feel like the show is that invested in it either. I honestly just feel like I was saying before, I think it's just giving us yet another suspect for who could be, you know what I mean? Like, does Yao know about it? And is Yao the one who's sending the text messages, I think it's just more, like, once again, just like the Agatha Christie motif of like making everybody a suspect, right? I think I don't think there's exploring this relationship. They kind of sprang it on us as a haha. It's like not that interesting, right? So
exactly that, like, okay, all right then. You guys are hooking up too. It's a secret. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have Lars wakes up in a very good mood. He has a dream that he's giving birth. And of course, the issue he has with his boyfriend is that he does not want to have a child. So does this mean that maybe deep down inside he does want to have a child? And we also see something interesting there, that in the dream, Tony is the one who's helping him birth the child. And the two interesting points about it. One is that, he's giving birth to a boy. So Tony, in the book, by the way, he has sons, but in the show, he has only daughters. So does it mean that he did want a son? And if that's the case, then it's weird that Lars had somehow intuited that to integrate it into his dream.
It is a strange dream, and it's I guess it's interesting that they both were so happy about it, right? About having this baby, and tells you more about maybe what's really going on in not only Lars's subconscious, but also Tony's. And then, I thought Tony's reaction was both interesting and funny, to be very sensitive about the whole thing, like couldn't just blow it off as like a joke, right? Like
Right.
it clearly hit a nerve.
Is that it definitely hit a nerve, but he didn't seem to be like, especially like as like, a very macho type, has his, manhood assaulted
No,
or
it didn't
something.
seem like a homophobia issue or anything. No.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's pretty
No.
much it. And I think it just seemed like he was just kind of like, oh, come on. And then kind of, but you could tell, like you said, Bobby Cannavale being a good actor, that he, is able to convey that there is something there, right? And then we do find
Right.
out a little bit of it later on when he meets with Francis to talk a little bit about it,
Yes.
that he had missed the birth of his children, and that maybe that is something that hit a nerve, that he was not there. And then, of course, like in his dream, he's there during the birth of a son, which he doesn't actually have. So maybe he doesn't want a son or wanted one. And when he was younger, what else do we find out? We find out that that patient, most likely the patient that we saw passed out, was Connolly. That's his last name. That because they mention it by name when they're talking about who might be texting or sending these texts to Masha to threaten them to.
Well, Frances passes out in her oatmeal.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's
which
right.
I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
But she has that, I don't know if you call it a dream, but while she's passed out, she has that vision of her ex that scammed her coming to apologize and explain that it was all a giant misunderstanding. That then turns into a critique of her work as completely meaningless and kind of just lowest common denominator market for her work, which you can see she and it comes out later in her conversation with Tony that this is maybe her biggest fear about what she does for a living, is that there really isn't much substance to it.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things that are interesting there. One is, I wrote down in my notes where I found it funny that, she's like, I can't believe they want me to like put in like a murder mystery or something, like, they want me to like, speed up the tempo of the book, which made me laugh as I am reading the book, which, is very, very slow paced and really just interior. That I'm like, and I don't know if this is intentional, but is David Kelly critiquing himself for putting in these kind of hackneyed points into his adaptation, or is he being critical of like basically that he has to add a murder to Big Little Lies or add this stalker plot to this show to get the show made, right? Like, is he criticizing the audience in a way, right? So I'm not sure, but there's something going on there. But there's also a very interesting critique in the book, which is much deeper, which I'll get into when we do that episode in the future. But yeah, Frances is touching on a little bit of it here, and like you said, that she is probably getting wounded a little bit but her fake love interest in the show is basically critiquing her writing. And yeah, at the beginning, I actually thought that this might not be a fake out. I actually thought this might be legitimate, and that this was like Masha potentially messing with her. And it's like the first of a few different psychedelic type visions that people are having here, like like hallucinations, right? You have the Zoe sees her brother. We see Lars has the very vivid dream. You see Frances falls asleep in her oatmeal and has this vision of but then following that scene, Tony helps her clean herself up and everything, and they, like you said, they have a very good scene where she was really upset about the things that this imagined person was criticizing her work for. And I liked the whole conversation she has with Tony, where Tony goes, better to have basically better to be a has-been than a never has been, right? And I thought that was interesting, right? That kind of putting it in those terms, right? So it's at least they had their moment.
The comparison she was making is that he was once good at what he did, but she feels like she was never really good at what she did. Right. So she doesn't feel she's on the same level as him, because she's not giving herself credit for her accomplishments, which I know at least Jessica, right, has said that she read her books and loved them. I think it was Jessica. So clearly there is, something to what she's doing. She's not giving herself enough credit. But yeah, then that scene takes a darker turn, right, with Tony.
He does seem to be suicidal, right? You would read that the same way, right?
Yes, I did. And she seems, legitimately concerned, as a true friend would be.
Then we have the reveal that Delilah is also in a romantic relationship with Masha, and that might be her true root of her jealousy, possibly. And that Masha says, I won't tell Yao about it. So she's basically having a sexual relationship with both of them, and and keeping it to herself. So that's pretty, selfish on her part. But I guess she is a selfish person anyway, so it's not surprising.
She's not so great. Yeah.
Then we find a little bit more about Lars' backstory, that he, he feels bad for breaking up his family. Oh, and like you called this out already, I actually thought it was very nice that when Lars is talking to Zoe, and he basically says to her that you shouldn't be going through this on your own, and she's like, I'm not, and he like has that little smile that he's like,
Little
oh,
smile. It's very sweet.
which was
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, that was nice. I mean, even though he's still more interior, like he doesn't have like any of these like big scenes yet, like some of the other characters have had. This is a pretty big episode for him, right? Where he kind of, Zoe basically calls him out as a friend. He has this vision that seems to like kind of crack his hard exterior. And then there's that very funny interaction where he's going to walk out to the hot springs, and Carmel has seen Ben and Jessica having sex there, so they're kind of rekindling their relationship there. And she reacts badly because she still has internally has this anger that she can't manage properly. So they run into each other, and she's like, I'm not in the mood to talk to you. And he basically starts getting her to open up, and they actually have, and she softens immediately. And I like when she goes, your secret's out, Lars, right? She says, you're a good person. So that's Lars' secret in the end, is that he's actually a good person. After being a jerk to everybody, he's actually probably not deep down inside a jerk after all. Of course, we, just to mention what we saw, that we see Ben and Jessica. We find out our mystery, the question we asked you asked last week about, whether she came with the money,
right?
Like what's their background? And it turns out, no, they've been together since high school, right? So he like fell in love with her in high school, asked her out. They've been dating for a really long time, but now he doesn't, she's had so much surgery done, and that she, like, basically he doesn't recognize her anymore, that he thinks the money has like ruined their relationship.
Yeah. And that's something that you hear about happening to people that come into massive sums of money, right? That they really aren't prepared for the way that it changes their life. And they, on the whole, end up more unhappy than they were before. That's a real phenomenon, apparently.
They seem more on the same page, once again, to reference the book. They seem more on the same page here than they do in the book. In the book, she seems to chafe more. They're like saying like, oh, they're both kind of saying things were better before the money, right? And anyway, they and that leads to a romantic moment, which is what Carmel interrupts. Well, she doesn't interrupt because they don't even notice that she's there. Speaking of sex scenes, we have a very strange sex scene between Yao and Delilah, where they're doing, I don't know what that, you were saying it was Reiki? Is that what you
I mean, it seemed like some kind of weird Reiki sex. I don't know. Like, I'm rolling my eyes from here. Listen, I don't think you need to have physical contact to have an orgasm. So like, I buy that it can happen. I just don't understand why this needed to be part of the show.
Maybe they're not having, physical sex with each other though, right? So maybe, in other words, maybe they're only having sex with Masha and not having actual traditional sex with each other at all. Who knows? So then Masha also gets a text message, right? She gets a text message.
Yes.
From,
and I couldn't make out what the image was here. I even rewound it to try and see, and I still couldn't figure it out.
It was a dead animal. I assumed it was the goat, but now in retrospect, after you were confused by it, I guess the goat would never have looked that way, because it was a regular goat, and then it was
dinner.
Exactly. So it wouldn't have like looked like, it kind of looks like roadkill in the picture. But anyway, long story short is they're threatening that she'll be killed next.
Yes.
That's the point.
In the end, someone still wants to kill her.
Someone wants to kill her. Big surprise. Who doesn't at this point? Yeah, and I think that gets us pretty close to the end of the episode. There's a couple of interesting things that happen now. One is, well, first of all, the one thing I wanted to call out is that Michael Shannon sings twice in the episode, and he can sing a little bit. He actually can sing a little bit, so I was a little surprised that he could.
I don't necessarily understand why his pants need to be up so high all the time, but I don't mind the singing.
It's a tradition somehow. I'm not sure why.
Yes.
And he sings at the very beginning, because apparently it's the birthday tradition. That he sings for the at one point the twins, but just for Zoe now. And he sings some song from Greece. I can't remember which one it is at the beginning of the episode. And then he sings a song that I did not know. I don't know this song, the one that he sings at the end, but it sounds like kind of more of like an old, almost not a Sinatra song, but in that tradition of like a troubadour type song.
Mhm.
And he sings to her. And then, they all celebrate Zoe's birthday. They have a cake and everybody's there and they're celebrating. And Zoe starts talking to her brother, right? Who's kind of
Mhm.
off screen. She still sees him. And she's talking to him, and Masha sees this, and Masha gets
Mhm.
very excited. So that makes me wonder what Masha's deal is here, because Masha's very excited by, seeing Zoe kind of communing with someone who's not there. And I have a feeling I stopped reading the book because I didn't want to inadvertently spoil anything, although the book is so
Mhm.
completely different. But there is something strange going on with Masha. She keeps having a vision of a little boy who like emerges from this
Mhm. Okay.
from like a lake in her dreams. And so I'm wondering if she is trying to, maybe there is some supernatural aspect here where she's trying to commune with the dead, possibly.
Well, she
But
says you're the key,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like it raises the question for me, like, does every group that she assembles have someone who is the key? Is she
right,
the key to some bigger ongoing thing that's happening that she's been trying to accomplish?
right.
But yeah, it does seem like there's something bigger going on here with I don't know, those who have passed on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only thing that's left at this point in the show, right? I mean, honestly, we're 5 episodes and we have 3 more episodes. Next episode is called Mother Load, which is coming out tomorrow, so we'll be able to watch it pretty soon enough. And but like you said, I think at this point, like not only did we kind of have the reveal that everybody is medicated last episode, now we have kind of everybody kind of coming to terms with their own issues in this episode. So, I mean, the only thing that's kind of left out there is kind of what this bigger conspiracy might be that Masha has. And, based on this, and also based on a few clues that I saw in the book, it is possible that there is something that Masha does think she might be able to commune with
Mhm.
the dead, possibly. That I am kind of curious about that, because that would take the show in kind of a very different direction it's been so far.
And also at the birthday party, very sweet moment with Tony asking Frances to dance, right?
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, and everybody kind of notices that they're kind of getting close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lars asking Carmel to dance too,
Oh
which
yeah,
was
of
also very
course. Yeah,
sweet.
that was nice too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Really sweet moments.
Yeah, so they all seem to be doing well. I'm sure things will get much worse before they get better.
Do you have a theory on who is stalking Masha?
I have a feeling it's going to be Yao or Delilah. That it's I mean, the other possibility I was thinking that somebody might be there. Once again, this is something that I actually over Lars once again still has a way to communicate with the outside world. So he's he goes out to his hidden
Yeah, how
phone.
is that? I thought they took away his stuff.
I guess he had. I mean, he's supposedly he's a investigative journalist. So I'm sure he like just like a spy would, you probably like surrender your phone, but then you always have your backup phone. So,
Backup.
but it seemed like
Okay.
it seemed like they took his phone and then they took his
Yeah.
backup phone because it seemed like they knew
Yeah, I
about
would
that
have liked
one.
a throwaway line on how that tree, it just keeps on giving.
It's the giving tree. And she just has a bunch of phones in there. They take one and just gives another one in there. But yeah, so he's still leaking information. So it's possible that he's in communication with somebody on the outside, maybe about the Connolly case. So maybe it's not maybe he's investigating her for impropriety rather than, but still that wouldn't explain who, if someone's trying to sue her for her practices, I don't think they would be stalking her, because that could be,
Right.
lead to criminal charges at the same time.
Right.
I don't know who else it could possibly be. I don't, it's definitely not Tony. It's definitely not Francis. We're too much inside of Francis' head. We would have known by now. It's definitely not the Marconi family. Like, I don't know. Speaking of the Marconi family, I did miss one scene, which is
the cliff diving.
the cliff diving. Yeah. So Napoleon gets Heather to jump, to take a leap. And
Yes.
And she likes it, right? That was my main note there is that what a beautiful location that is. That with that being able to, like, when they're photographing from under the cliff and you can see them like jumping off the top. So a really, really beautiful location, wherever that is. I'd like to go visit. I probably won't dive
You
off
said
of
this
that.
was shot in Australia, right?
In Australia, somewhere in Australia. Sure. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you have any theory? What's your theory?
Could theoretically be, I guess, would be Glory. I don't know Glory's story. I don't know how long she's been around. Kind of unclear to me. She's just like lurking in the background in a way that seems like, okay, maybe. And then of the main guess there's no reason that it would be Jessica and Ben, but I do feel like they're underdeveloped as far as what we've learned about everybody. So then that makes me think, well, maybe there's something more that they're doing with these two characters if we haven't learned nearly as much about them as we've learned about everyone else.
Well, first of all, like Glory is, I think, too much of a background player for just suddenly pop up as a suspect. You know, I mean, not that that's not the case for these Agatha Christie type movies, but it is still seems kind of would be pretty weak as a suspect. And then like, you know, like you said, like, you know, Ben and Jessica, yeah, they definitely have more backstory that we don't know about. But that would still be like, imagine Jessica all of a sudden was like, you know, had been stalking her the whole time. That would be kind of like so contrived to be like, what? I wouldn't put it past the show. I'm just hoping they come up with something a little more satisfying than that. But so Only Murders in the Building. So the name of the episode is True Crime, and it's on FX, and the show is on FX on Hulu, as is Nine Perfect Strangers. So a few things about this. This show was created by Steve Martin and his writing partner, whose name I forget. He has very few credits, but I assume he's probably been working with Martin for a very long time. He's just not credited on a lot of these things because he's kind of his, you know, ghost, you know, partner, writer, etc. And created the show. I thought this was a lot of fun. And
so fun.
I had a bunch of questions for you. So I had to do my own, I just ended up doing my own research. One was that the building, I'm like, which building is this? Have you seen this building before? I have definitely walked past this building before.
I am speculating that this is the Dakota on the Upper West Side, even though they're calling it the Arconia, which sounds very much like Ansonia, which is where, you know, a friend of ours lived when she first graduated college. And that is the movie Single White Female is in the Ansonia. But I think even though the name is similar, I'm pretty sure it's the Dakota.
This is actually,
which is where John Lennon used to live.
It's actually the Belle Nord. Do you know the Belle Nord?
Oh, well, there you go.
But I thought this, I had some of the same speculation you did actually. But I ended up looking it up because I was just so curious, and I assumed that I was basically almost just confirming my own expectations, but I was wrong. But it's interesting building. I've never been inside those gates, but I think I've seen it's pretty close to Central Park actually, and I know I've walked
see that
past,
it's very close to the park.
Yeah, and I've walked past that, you know, the arced gate. Obviously, had no idea that there's that whole garden inside and everything, but.
I think the Dakota has a similar gate though. So you might have walked past the Dakota.
It's possible that they could be using different interiors. It's absolutely possible. So.
That's true also, yeah.
I was also curious, like when they shot this, because, you know, like it doesn't feel like as COVID affected as some other productions that I've seen recently. And they shot from December 2020, which by the way is interesting because it's taking place from the first episodes we've seen. We see someone wrapping Christmas presents, and then, oh, I take it back. I remember now, she finds a note, and this is much later in the show. She finds a note. The person who dies in the show was supposed to meet somebody on January 31st, and she pulls out her phone and January 24th, which means that in the next week, the very next episode will be that date, right?
So it's post-Christmas,
post-Christmas,
right?
Which kind of makes sense too with the son's irritation with dad, as if he's showing up now, right? Like later on after Christmas, you know, and his son, of course, calls him out. It's like saying, like, you know, you don't even see your grandkids, etc.
Yeah,
and it's like, he's hanging out in the city. He's trying to hang on to this thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're jumping way ahead where we are with the whole plot. But so they shot this between December 2020 and April 2021, when COVID was on the. You know, things were better in New York anyway, much better. And now they're getting a little bit worse, but I mean, we're still hanging in there, hopefully. And I'm happy that we have, you know, these performers, these older performers, Martin Short and Steve Martin, that is, who are not like I'm so tired of everybody's just trying to reboot one of their old properties. I'm glad that they're doing something new. And that was something I really was happy to see. Early, but by the way, the critical and audience response so far on this show is really, really high. So I hope that it gets, you know, continues to pay off, because I think it's been a lot of fun so far. And
for sure. And I say that as someone who, I feel like I'm neutral on Steve Martin. I know some people really love him. I just don't feel one way or the other about him. I actively dislike Martin Short. I don't know why, but I do.
And I have no familiarity with Selena Gomez aside from knowing that she's Justin Bieber's ex-girlfriend. So I come into it with very little except negative feelings about Martin Short for an inexplicable reason. And I still really, really enjoyed this.
The opening scene, which is like a flash forward.
Yes.
Which is the alarm is going off, and Steve Martin and Martin Short, even though we just discussed their character names and using the actors' names anyway, meet in the hallway, and they, clearly have grown very attached to Mabel, find her kneeling over a body with lots of blood, right?
Yeah.
So, and she says, this isn't what it looks like.
Right.
So we have some kind of idea, literal foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the future here.
Then we flash back, Steve Martin with his internal monologue. He's saying, people don't, you don't hear about bodies piled up in the backyard in New York because nobody has backyards, basically. And we also see that, we kind of get introduced very efficiently, by the way, that, he's kind of like was a star of some TV show years ago. And that's a very funny interaction he has on the street where like someone goes, oh, me and my dad used to, used to watch your show all the time. And now my dad has, has ALS or something.
Yes, that was rough.
Yeah. So it's like, so that just like a reminder of how old he is, basically.
Yes.
And then we also see Selena Gomez's internal monologue, and she's all, basically she listens to podcasts, these true crime podcasts, so that she's prepared to murder anybody who tries to attack her, which maybe references back to the flash forward we see, right? Because they're very similar type of.
Maybe.
And then we also see Martin Short's preposterous, as he is a ridiculous character, that he's having this preposterous, like New York, why do I love you so much? It's a very overwritten kind of, which is very much in his character, to the point where he's caught in a reverie, like in the middle of an intersection, and almost gets run over. But it's just funny to kind of get introduce these characters with very different internal monologues. The thing that unifies them, and I like the way they do this in the show, by the way, is that they basically are, Steve Martin knows who Martin Short is. Martin Short is like kind of like constantly trying to, he's like an overeager puppy, which is kind of his persona in general, by the way. He's like, he wants everybody to like him as a performer, I think too, by the way. And maybe that's why he irritates you. But he's playing into that. He's leaning into that persona. And Steve Martin, on the other hand, is someone who like basically is almost an agoraphobic, according to him, though, but we're not 100% sure that we trust everything these people tell us, by the way. But and which is part of the mystery, one of the mysteries,
right?
Like he doesn't like to be around a lot of other people, and so they're very opposite in their personality. He's irritated by him constantly, and they just happen to be in the elevator when Selena Gomez is in there as well. And Steve Martin kind of like has a moment with her just to kind of be like, that guy annoys me. And because she seems to like not want to be there either. But the thing that brings them together, and I think this is the first thing that I like really love that they kind of crystallize in such a simple way, is I think this is like kind of like the value of culture in a way. These people who really don't like each other and really have nothing in common with each other. And it turns out they all listen to the same podcast. So now they're all best friends. Just because of that. And I think that that's so true, right? It's like, this is the whole point of a way of us having this exercise here.
And it bonds you. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's kind of like the value of culture in general, right? It's just like being able to have this bonding experience over something that not even culturally relevant. It still allows you to have an experience with somebody else. And that in and of itself has its value, right? So I thought that was very funny, the way they kind of very quickly become like best friends, or I guess as best friends as they can be, because they all seem to have their own social problems, but they become very friendly very quickly, purely because they have this shared interest in this podcast. And of course, they will end up creating or starting a podcast of their own, just like we did. So just like we did.
The parallels to real life.
You're listening to All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma from Cinda Canning. Funding is provided by our sponsors, the RAND Corporation, the Milton and Miriam Swan Foundation for the Arts and for dissolving the Federal Reserve, and Trader Joe's. With additional support from Royal Crown Cruises, the Royal Crown Prince of Dubai, and listeners like you. And now, here's Cinda Canning with episode 6 of All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma.
But on the darker side of that is, they're definitely trying to be like Serial, right? It's kind of like what they're pretending. Like even the coast isn't called Sarah Koenig, but it almost sounds like Sarah Koenig, right? So it's very much like they're kind of playing on Serial. But on the darker side of things, I actually find it very interesting that, as a fan of podcasts, when you look at the charts, so much of what's popular on podcasts are these true crime type podcasts. And, and like, I think it's number 2 or number 3 most popular podcast in the world is My Favorite Murder, which is these comedians who are talking about like murders and stuff. And I really wonder like what the relationship with these women, mostly women who are listening to these podcasts is. And I find it almost like a satire on that. When you see Selena Gomez is like, I like to like lay in bed and like imagine that someone's murdering me and then that I kill them before they can kill me. And that's how I put myself to sleep. And I'm like, I think that is partially the mentality of people who are like,
well, and there's like that little introductory part. And I'm not sure who the voiceover is, whether it was Selena Gomez or somebody else, about, somehow we think that by watching these things like Dateline in 2020 and listening to these podcasts, we're going to learn how to protect ourselves from ever being in that position.
Right. And I think that's the psychology that I actually find interesting is like exactly what you're describing. Is it like prepping yourself for this supposed thing? Is it just to scare yourself? And like, anyway, I find it very interesting that there is.
Well, I would never have met my ex-boyfriend in a parking lot in the middle of the night. So that wouldn't have happened to me,
Exactly. So that I guess it's all preparation. What else do we find out here? So they become fast friends, bonding over this. And the reason that they all end up realizing that they all listen to the same podcast is because they all get kicked out of the building. There's a fire alarm. And during this fire alarm is when this supposed murder/suicide occurs. So when it turns out, when they find out who it is, that this person was not liked by anyone in the building, from as far as they can tell. And it was the guy who had been in the elevator with them.
Right.
All at the
So
same
they're
time.
all united by this elevator ride where all four of them met each other.
Exactly. And so now one of them ends up dead. Right. And the question is like, why would this person who is about to kill himself be A, taking out the trash, which is apparently what he was doing, and B, like be in the middle of this conversation? Doesn't seem like somebody who's,
and right, he's saying on the phone, what do you mean I can't get it until tomorrow morning?
Right.
So in his head, he thinks there's going to be a tomorrow morning for him to get this package, right? Theoretically.
Right. So all of this does not make sense for someone to be about to commit suicide. And this gets them on this treasure hunt, right? Of basically saying, and we start teasing it even this early on, that they're going to make a podcast. They're going to investigate this. They haven't named the podcast yet, though. And when they do name it, I think that's in the next episode. That is very entertaining as well. And so we got 3 episodes in one shot. Very entertaining, by the way, all relatively short, about 30 minutes each, minus the, credits and before and after bumpers. It's probably around 30 minutes, maybe even a little less. So a quick watch, very light, a lot of fun. They introduce these characters very well. And they all have secrets that they're trying to hide. By the way, one very funny thing about Martin Short, I love that you see all of his posters in his office of all his shows. And one of them is called Newark, which I thought was very funny.
I saw that as well. Yes.
I grew up in Newark, which is a city right across the street from New York, right across the river from New York. And not as glamorous as New York. So it's just very funny to see Newark as a musical. Would be very, very funny. So I laughed at that. And that was very entertaining. But then we wrap up the episode and we realize that we are not hearing everything that we know. Throughout the course of the episode, we see Steve Martin making an omelet and throwing it away over and over and over again. And we don't understand why he's doing this. Although he does make himself a sunny side up egg at the end, which means that he has maybe moved on beyond his omelet fixation. So the button at the end of episode 1, before we transition to episode 2, is that we see Selena Gomez in her apartment, very strange apartment she has. It's basically gutted. And she's in the shower.
Massive. I mean, I always am looking at the New York City real estate in these shows, and oh my gosh, it's massive.
Right.
Yeah.
And even they who live in the building are like shocked at the size of the building when they eventually get inside the apartment. But we see her showering in this gutted apartment, and we're like, what is she doing there? Does she actually live there? What's her mystery? And she has a lot of mysteries. But one of them that we find out here at the end is that the camera pans over, and we see that she has. Her screensaver is basically a group of 4 people, including Tom Kono, right? Tom
Kono?
I think it's Tom Kono. So basically the murdered or potentially murdered, suicide, whatever, the dead person, who she supposedly has not showed any indication of knowing anything about, is not only on her screensaver. It's not a random photo, by the way. She calls it, it's a photograph that says the Hardy Boys, which means that the Hardy Boys was this group of friends that she had as children who solved crimes. So this would have been an intimate friend of hers for a very long time. And yet she is saying nothing about knowing them. So dun, 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 what secrets is she hiding, right?
Tim Kono.
Tim Kono. I knew there was a T name in there. Tim Kono.
I'm about to pass out. Oh, how did you get here?
It was open.
I don't lock my door. Never have.
That's insane.
It's neighborly.
I mean, a murderer probably lives in the building, but I guess old white guys are only afraid of colon cancer and societal change. Sad.
So a couple of things from episode 2 that I'm curious about. One is, what is up with all of the stolen jewelry, which is definitely going to be
Yes.
something more relevant in the upcoming episodes. But we find out that what's her name, Tim Kono, right? So the reveal at the end of episode 1 is that Selena Gomez's Mabel character, that not only did she know Tim Kono, not like barely knew him, he was one of the Hardy Boys, which was this group
That's
of four
right.
who used to like solve mysteries around the building or pretend to solve mysteries. And
Yes.
his apartment is full of these books, the Hardy Boy mysteries, basically all of them that they've collected.
Yes,
for-
seems like a complete set.
pretty
Yes.
much. I mean, there's so many of them, right? And then when she opens them up, they're actually full of jewelry. So whoever, if indeed someone murdered him, which I assume is the case, whoever murdered him left all that jewelry there. So that's very interesting.
And why was Tim Kono under financial stress when he clearly had all this jewelry that he could sell at any time?
Well, yeah, as you could point, yes. I mean, you have to pawn it and you could get caught pawning it. But yeah, still, it's like, like you said, what is going on with all that jewelry? There's so many questions that are unanswered there. Oh, and the one thing we discover also is that Tim Kono probably did not kill himself, considering that he was waiting for a package. And we find out what was in the package, which was a ring.
An engagement ring, it
It
looks
seems like an engagement ring, which
Yeah.
does not fit Selena Gomez. It slips right off of her finger. So like any possible, I mean, very intentionally, I think they're making that point. And I don't remember if it's in this episode or in the 3rd episode, but we also see a flashback where he basically has seen Mabel. He knows that she's back in the building. And she says, he's basically saying like, I haven't seen you in 10 years. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you anymore. So we do know that they have had interactions previously.
Right. And she's telling him, you know, Oscar is about to get out and he'll be back. And don't you think this is a good time to tell everybody the truth about what you know and about what really happened?
Yeah. So it turns out in their past that one of their friends, another one of the Hardy Boys in this, who aren't all boys, by the way, that one of the girlfriends, whose name I don't know, unfortunately, the blonde girl, died on New Year's Eve some years back, I guess 10 years back. If they haven't seen each other in 10 years, that's probably when it was.
Yeah, I think it's around 10 years. Yeah.
And that she had fallen from the building or was pushed from the building. Something happened. And I guess they assumed she was pushed from the building, considering that Oscar, who's not in the show yet, I don't think we've seen Oscar yet, is coming out of jail. And I think he took the blame for the crime, but Tim Kono knew something.
Right. And it seems like Oscar was the boyfriend, or, you know, at least had some sort of romantic relationship
Right.
of the girl who ended up getting pushed off the top of the building. Right.
I believe so. And then these all kind of blurred together, to be honest with you.
Yes, I agree. Because they're
and-
short, they're quick, they're fun. Yeah.
I'm sorry, things have gotten a bit away from me.
No, it's okay. Do you have another cat, Mr. Morris?
No, this is all Evelyn's. If I don't touch anything, food, water, toys, I can pretend she's still here.
You know, I heard this once, and maybe you can appreciate it. A cat never really leaves you because they transmit parasites.
I'm sure Evelyn was very clean.
She was, thank you.
I had way more notes on episode 3 because a lot of things happened there. That not only is Selena Gomez lying about her backstory, but we also find out that Steve Martin is lying about his backstory too, right? Because he's been saying that he lived alone for 28 years and his dad was abusive, so he always thought he'd be abusive. But it turns out that's not true because the next door neighbor says, oh, when I smell those omelets, it makes me think about Lucy, right? And I miss Lucy, right? So he wasn't living alone for 28 years. That turns out to be so.
But there is a question about whether the rest of the story is true or not about the dad, right?
Right. Well, she's confronted because she sees that that's like a speech that he gives in one of the reruns of his shows. And she confronts him about it. And he basically says, well, it's all true, which once again, we're still not certain about. But obviously the fact that he is only, lived alone for 28 years was not true.
Yeah.
We find out that he gets a nosebleed when he is nervous, right?
Yes,
And the
that's
thing that
right.
triggers his nosebleed, by the way, is Amy Ryan, right? Amy Ryan comes into the elevator and they have a little flirtation, actually. She plays the bassoon.
Mhm.
And apparently he can hear her playing the bassoon in the courtyard, I should say. So he's aware of her, and they have a little flirtation. And she will be back. You'll see her in this most recent episode. And of course, she's going to be back because you don't hire Amy Ryan to do one scene, one scene of a show. So. One thing I do enjoy here, by the way, because I'm not a musical theater person at all. I've only seen
Me either.
but I do enjoy because I find it kind of ridiculous. I do find like jokes about musical theater very funny because it all seems so preposterous to me. So that's why I like when you see Martin Short, like you see his apartment decorated with some of his failed plays, and it has Splash the musical, which apparently was a big disaster, which reminds me of the Spider-Man musical that came on a few years ago. And people kept getting injured.
Yes, it reminded me of that as well. I think it's supposed to, for those of us that are familiar with it anyway. And I will say I was one of the unlucky ones that actually did see that one. So it was very bad.
I was working in Las Vegas years ago when I first started dating Kim, and we went to that Cirque du Soleil, the water one, which I can't remember. And there is a stunt in there where, I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but it's pretty amazing what they do from a stage production standpoint. They have a floor that basically is the bottom of the pool. So as people are like ascending to the top of these ladders or whatever to dive into the pool, the floor will like kind of recede into the pool. And then so then all of a sudden they'll dive onto the stage, and there will be water there for them to dive into. And then when the dancers come back out, they will the floor at the bottom of the pool will kind of rise up to the surface of the water, and then you could see the water getting sucked into these like little openings in the floor, like sucking the water back in, and the floor is completely dry like instantly. So from a stagecraft standpoint, I was very impressed with it, just technically. But anyway, my point, the reason I bring this up is as I was watching the floor turn into a pool like almost instantaneously, and all these men climbing, these like mermen type people climbing these very tall ladders and diving into this pool, like I in my mind envisioned, could you imagine the floor failed? And basically I envisioned exactly what Martin Short describes in the failed previews for the Splash musical, where people were just like one after the other hitting the floor and just thudding and splashing like a fish, just like hitting the street. So we see Nathan Lane, another big celebrity here, and we actually see Nathan Lane and Sting, right? Two big cameos in this.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Sting, so that was entertaining for me.
But I think he'll definitely be back a few more times.
Yeah, and I like this too because I think Sting is a person that people, at least in my experience, have accused of taking himself too seriously, perhaps. So I like seeing him in this role here.
So Sting is here as a suspect. He doesn't like dogs, and of course that pays off as a potentially making him a suspect because Oliver's dog gets poisoned, right, in this episode.
Yes. Sorry, I got confused with the cat for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
they poisoned, which of course does tie it back to the cat, right? Because the cat was also poisoned, right? So it's possible that the same person who poisoned the cat may have also attempted to poison Oliver's dog. I will, minor spoiler here, the dog does not die, just so you know. Just so if anybody was concerned, the dog does not die. And then again, you never kill the dog, right? You never, that's the rule. You never kill the dog on the show. So they do not kill the dog. The bigger cameo that we see here is Nathan Lane, who basically was the person who funded the failed Splash musical. Very funny, this whole idea that you would make Splash the movie into a musical. But of course, dumber things have been done on Broadway. So once again, I don't understand how those shows stay on how they succeed. Because in my mind, when I heard like, oh, that Broadway show, which they spent $50 million on, but Spider-Man is just the most egregious example of it, is a complete and utter failure, and they lost tens of millions of dollars. And I always think, of course it did. Like, who thought that was a good idea? But somehow these things keep getting made, and I guess people like Nathan Lane keep funding them. So,
and we meet his ex-wife there too, right?
Yeah, so we see her momentarily.
That's interesting as well, and the story of how they met and his persistence with her.
And if also and I guess I forgot to call this out in episode 2, but we also met Oliver's son as well, right? So we meet who lives in New Jersey in the suburbs.
Yes.
And he actually, we find that this is actually a big thing. I guess I didn't take a note of this in episode 2 because it's actually a very big thing that happens. And it's that, Steve Martin basically has his money. And I guess we understand now why everybody lives in the building. It's something that kind of comes out in episode 2. Steve Martin has the residuals from this 9 years that he was on this police procedural. So I guess, he's getting residuals for the rest of his life. So he's probably, he's a has-been, but probably very well paid, right?
Yes.
Meanwhile, you have Mabel, Selena Gomez's character, who is supposedly, and we don't know if this is true yet either, remodeling her aunt's apartment, and which she has so far gutted, but has not done anything beyond that. But once again, I'm not sure if I believe that, and I'm not sure if she's just squatting. It's possible. And she's using the "I'm remodeling this place" as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we find out that Oliver, his backstory is that he was a director on Broadway. And as is probably often the case for certain people like that, he probably was very well paid at one point, but probably, lived a lavish lifestyle. And of course, doesn't have anything to show for it now. And Nathan Lane, who was basically his producer, still lives in the same building. And he once again goes and asks him for money to produce the podcast, right? So that's kind of what we find out. He does get, it's funny, he gets $30-something thousand to produce his podcast, which, hey, everybody out there, doesn't cost $30,000 to make a podcast. Trust me, I know. Maybe $30, not 30,000. But of course, he needs the money to, pay his building fees because, they're basically about to kick him out. There's also a running gag here, by the way, which begins here and it continues in the most recent episode, that for some reason, Oliver does not eat any solid foods. He only eats dips. So he likes he likes hummus. Yeah. So that whole joke that he in the second episode when they go to Tim Kono's wake and he takes all the dips, I thought he was just making that up, like it was just an excuse for him to raid. But it's like, no, it's all he eats. He gets into his whole philosophy of it in the most recent episode. So he likes only dips. It's very easy to clean up.
I mean, I love dip, so I get it, but it does seem like practically speaking, very hard to implement that type of diet. But
not exclusively, right? Yeah, it's a little extreme. It's a bit of an extreme diet for him. We see that Steve Martin gets to play a concertina. He's trying to score the podcast himself, right? And he actually does play a concertina pretty well, actually. And and then you mentioned already, Oscar is getting out, so that is something to look forward to in the upcoming episodes. And we kind of find out what did Tim Kono know, and why did Oscar take the fall? The only thing I want to add here is that I am calling it early. Just like I was wrong with Mayor of Easttown, that as soon as I saw Guy Pearce, I was like, Guy Pearce is the murderer. And I was completely wrong on that. I did figure out the murder eventually, but that was wrong.
Yes, you did.
In this regard, as soon as I saw Amy Ryan, I'm like, Amy Ryan's the killer. So that's my early theory.
I mean, it's not a bad one because it's unlikely it's Sting, right? So
yeah.
It's so hard for me because I watch them all in one sitting and I just don't know where one episode begins and the other ends. But one thing I thought was super charming was when Steve Martin wants to text Mabel to meet up and he can't figure out.
Oh my God, that was great. Yes, the texting etiquette was hilarious. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was just so sweet and so so typical of the generational divide, of how formal to be, how casual to be. So I enjoyed that moment a lot. One little I think this show's doing a really good job at getting the details of New York City living right. And one thing that I really thought was super cute is that when Mabel is, I think, flashing back to her time with the Hardy Boys and how they used to investigate crimes, they're in an apartment and they open a drawer full of boys' t-shirts. And right on top is this t-shirt that says Super Soccer Stars, which is like a very New York City kid thing to be part of Super Soccer Stars. My 4-year-old has already done 2 Super Soccer Stars classes. So, and we've got the t-shirts to show for it. So I thought that was a very cute, on point detail of New York City life. And what else did I want to say? Oh, what I really couldn't stand though on the musical theater front is that kind of chorus line kind of device that they're using.
Yes,
can't stand that.
Which I think was just at that episode. I hope so. Based on the most recent episode, it doesn't seem to be a motif they're going to keep coming back to. I was actually thinking about this while I was watching it, that certain things just permeate the culture, that as soon as I saw what he was doing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's like a chorus line, even though I've never seen a chorus line.
I also have not seen a chorus line.
somehow you just know that that's what the chorus line was like.
Yes. I didn't care for that. But I did love the scene with the dead cat in the freezer.
Yes, and he has a leg in his pocket. He doesn't know what to do with it, so he just brings it with him.
Yes, I thought the whole thing was so well done, very funny, very clever. I do want to mention that New York is a one-party recording state. You do not have to inform anyone that you are recording them. So
That's actually a very
so,
good. That's an interesting, because that is a gag that keeps coming up. So that is a. But I guess I don't
yeah,
know.
you don't. You, as long as you know you're being recorded, the other party does not have to know.
But I think
So-
here's maybe the gotcha there is, could you use it in a podcast though, without permission? Like as a, like, could you broadcast it
Okay,
without
good
permission? You know what I mean?
point.
You know, that's what I
yeah,
think
you
might
could
be
definitely use it as evidence. I don't
Yeah.
know if you could use it in a podcast.
Yeah, I think
So-
I think that's the gotcha, is that if they wanted to use it in their podcast. Speaking of that actor, the one who owns the cat, I guess we should go into that in a little more detail too. That we also find out that I guess a lot of people in the building did not like Tim Kono at all. They all started
Really,
bashing
nobody
him.
liked Tim Kono is what I'm getting. I don't think we've met a single person that did.
Yeah, they all, and I guess actually we find out a little bit when we see that flashback. Another thing that I forgot to mention, that we do see Mabel playing with him when he was young, and apparently
Yeah.
she says she always liked him because he was always like abrasive. He was always telling people exactly what he thought,
Mhm.
and then that's what made her like him. But everybody kind of disliked him, I guess, because of the same reason, right? That he was kind of always telling everybody exactly his opinion of everything, and including the fact that he, like, he didn't like people's pets, and he didn't like, a lot of different.
Right. It's fine to be that way, but it depends what your opinions are, right?
Yeah,
So-
exactly. Exactly. So yeah, so that was interesting to kind of see a little bit of backstory. But that actor, who's very funny, who owns the cat, has been a guest star multiple times in a show called High Maintenance, also in New York. Have you ever seen High Maintenance?
I love High Maintenance. I didn't recognize him from it, but I haven't watched it in quite a while.
He's like the agoraphobic guy. He's been there from the very
Yes, with
beginning.
the cans. Was there a thing with a display of cans?
I think he had something with a display cans. At one point, he lived with his mother at the very beginning of the show. His mother passes away at some point. For anybody who hasn't watched High Maintenance, it's basically a guy who delivers marijuana around New York City on a bicycle. He's like a bicycle messenger, but he has a network of folks who continuously text him and ask for. Amy Ryan's been a guest star on that show as well, by the way. So so we kind of check in with these people over and over again. And I love this show also, by the way, Sona. I wish there were more shows like this. I love the humanity of that show. Even when I don't, even when I don't like a specific episode, I love watching this show because there's just so few things out there that kind of give everybody a base level of like human dignity. So like even the weirdest oddball in the world has their own internal life going on, right? And this is basically a show that just explores that, and I love it. I think it's great. But anyway, that's a really good show too, as a recommendation. Definitely track that down. It's on HBO if anybody hasn't seen it. That's my digression on High Maintenance, but I was just calling out that that's the same guy, and I always find him very funny whenever he's
Yeah, they all did a great job. I thought that was a really comical scene, and all three of them I thought were very funny. And I will say though, Selena Gomez, not having really watched her in anything previously, I'm not sure if that's her normal manner of speaking or it's particular to the character, but it's like very strange to me, her manner. Have you noticed that?
The only other thing I've seen her in beyond this is I saw her in Spring Breakers, which is actually also very good, which I liked. But I do think that is, maybe she's leaning into it a little more, but I do think that that's in general her.
Yeah, like super deadpan, like very, which I'm not sure is my favorite thing, but it's okay. I still like her here.
So yeah, but I'm still really enjoying this, by the way. It's anybody out there who's hesitant to watch this, you will binge this show in no time at all. It's
flies by.
They fly by. They're very entertaining. The comedy is not over the top. Some of it is slapstick for sure. Like the cat sequence is very funny. So there's definitely slapstick here, as Steve Martin can, obviously do slapstick, asking Martin Short. But most of the comedy is just kind of very just witty little snippets of dialogue that are very clever. And the mystery is interesting. And I think it's well written in the fact that, these people are revealing their own internal mysteries as they're trying to solve this bigger mystery. The mystery is not, the stakes aren't so high where you're going to have nightmares watching the show. This is, this is just, it's a real breezy, almost like a Murder, She Wrote type thing, right? Where you're watching it just for entertainment value, like watching someone get killed for entertainment value, but that's actually a genre of TV. And that's kind of what this is. But I think with more wit and more style than something like
very witty. Yeah, for sure.
All right. I think that's it.
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.